Hi everyone, I'm Nicole, I'm an addict. I still get nervous to tell my story, and I get all the stuff going on of I want to be funny, or I want to, I don't want to be boring, I want to be this, that and the other, but ultimately I've just got the one story, so for those that have listened to it many times, I'll try and... Alan and Michelle suggested that I lied just to make it a bit more interesting. The trouble is I'm not very quick at thinking on my feet, so in about 2 weeks' time I'll come up with an amazing story that I could have told, but they suggested it on the way over and I'm not quick enough to come up with anything interesting, so I'll just have to settle for the truth for now, unfortunately. I was just thinking back to when I was young, and rather than talking about what I did, I was trying to think about who I was, I think, growing up, and some of the ways in which I acted as a kid is still some of the ways in which I can act now. And I was a fiercely loyal person. So I've got an older brother, he's nearly 6 years older than me. Now me and him, we would either I would laugh in ways that I've never laughed with anyone else, with my brother. I don't know if any of you have got like older siblings, but I was laughing so much I thought I would die at times with him. Or if he was tickling, where if he's tickling you or something, like tickling me, whatever. It'd be weird if he was tickling you, and it's like you're getting to the point where like you're laughing, so they carry on, they're laughing, they carry on, and now like you can't fucking breathe, and you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And so that's some of the great memories that I've got of my brother, and I was fiercely loyal to him. So the times that I was an annoying little sister. So I spent much of my time with dead arms, dead legs, being pinned to the ground. He'd do that stretchy spit thing over me, and all of that stuff. And I was the classic sort of like, mum, trying to get him in trouble and all of that sort of stuff. But there was one time me and him had been to play tennis, and on the way back he was getting stones and whacking stones at me with the tennis racket, and hit me with this stone, and it was agony. But I was just fiercely loyal. He was my big brother, and so when my parents were questioning what was going on, I was like, oh no, a car drove by and a stone kicked up and hit me, and so I had these sort of traits about me which I seem to have carried through life, and some of those, to the degrees of it, would have been of benefit and some of it wouldn't. But the bottom line is with that, so I was loyal in friendships, and I was fiercely protective of my friends. So there was this lad who'd thrown water bombs at my mate, and so then I went and obviously had to go and punch him. And then his mum came round to complain that I'd punched her son, and my dad was like, what, you've come round because my daughter has hit your son? It's like, what do you want me to do? But what I was not very good at is speaking up when I wasn't all right. So in all of these friendships of loyalty, and I would do what I could to make sure you lot are okay. But when it came down to making sure that I was okay, if I didn't feel, I don't know what, if I felt on the outs, or if I didn't feel like I fit in, I had no clue how to communicate that. And I still have that trouble now. That stuff that years down the line will still affect me in my day-to-day life, my ability to speak up for how I am in here. And when I've reviewed that, I consider, is this the beginnings of what it means to have low self-worth? If I can't speak up for myself, Is that the beginning point? Is that the starting point? And yet outwardly, I was actually, you would view me as being a really confident person, really, I was quite full of myself. I was, I did all right at school. I was really good at sports. So I had all this sort of confident persona about me. And yet in here, I wasn't at all. I was quite not okay at times and couldn't speak up for that. And then as I grew up, where that started to sort of perhaps have more of an impact is then when I'm sort of reaching my teenage years and my mates are starting to go out with boys. Well, that was like the epitome of hell for me. If I fancied a boy, I would be more comfortable to go up and punch him than to go up to him and say, "All right, bud," or whatever it is that people say. I don't know what people say. I just met people in rehab. That's how I've been able to have any kind of meaningful relationship. Just So when I discovered substances, those little times, those little bits that were chipping away at my insides of that low self-worth or not feeling quite right, when I started taking drugs, and it started off just with weed and speed and all of that sort of stuff, those inner feelings of low self-worth or anxiety or worry disappeared because it just didn't matter. And I would be like, it's weird to say me as sober when I'm talking about myself as a young person, but so me without drugs, I was so worried about what you thought of me. It ruled my life. I didn't want to be the person getting in trouble. I didn't want to be the loud person there making a dick out of themselves. I didn't want to be that. I would just be riddled with embarrassment. And yet, give me drugs or alcohol, whatever, and I'd be the life and soul of the party, and it did not matter what I was doing, how I behaved. If anything, it was the more stupid, the better, because that's actually who I wanted to be. The person that I was on drugs and alcohol, that's what I wanted. I like being the joker. I like making people laugh. I like all of that stuff, but I wasn't good at it if I didn't have drugs. So thus began that journey of I immensely liked the effect that drugs and alcohol produced for me. And it's taken a lot for me to sort of consider that, really, because I've always viewed that I had a great upbringing. I had everything that I needed and quite a lot of what I wanted, to be honest with you. And so I viewed that as being, oh, well, I've had a good upbringing, then why the fuck why am I a drug addict then? But when I look deeper and I look at the struggles that I had, the emotional struggles, I can see where some of my journey began. So, I loved drugs. I loved everything about it, and when I embarked upon my journey into harder substances, starting off with, class A's of E's and whatnot. And, a lot of people talk about Grange Hill as being their first indicators of when you should be careful and, you don't want to go down that route. I knew about the Grange Hill stuff, but it wasn't quite as prevalent for me. But mine was probably more the Leah Betts time. Do you remember Leah Betts? Died from taking E's, and and it was just absolutely that mindset. That's never going to happen to me. Like, she must have just been some kind of lightweight or whatever. And forgive me for saying that, because sorry. But it's that ominous. Is that how you say it? Ominous warning What did I say? Omnious. Omnious.
The Latin.
The more you say it, the more fucked up that word is as well. Ominous warnings that I failed to heed. And just carried on going about my business. And if anything, those days for me was the more the better. I needed to be that person who is, inside that speaker over there, not just next to it, in it, at one with that speaker, for all night going mad. Like, even being sick on ease was great. Everything about being on ease was great, and I loved it. And being at one with people, being at one with music, being at one with everything. And through that lifestyle, I was surrounded by people that was doing the same. It was just how it was. The people that I grew up with all got into it, loved it, and they were all fiends when it came down to that level of taking drugs. And through that sort of partying time of my life, I ended up meeting this guy who was the dealer of our little town, and and who's not attracted to a dealer? I mean, surely everyone is attracted to a dealer. I was attracted to a dealer. I'll speak for myself, but I imagine you lot were attracted to dealers too. And he had a lot of money, and he had a lot of drugs. And it didn't matter that he was 17 years older than me, and I was like 16. It doesn't, it didn't matter at the time. It's fucking gross now, but it didn't matter at the time. I just thought that was pretty cool. And didn't look at the broader picture. It didn't matter that he had a reputation for being a bit of a scumbag to women and his within his relationships. None of that mattered, because he had a lot of money and he had a lot of drugs. And so I quite quickly moved in with him, and sort of early on, after I'd turned 17, I moved in with him. And before I was 18, I was addicted to crack and heroin. So it had all pretty much gone downhill. Well, I mean, now that sounds like it went downhill. At the time, it was great. I loved crack cocaine. I fucking loved it. Everything about it I loved, and I was surrounded by a lot of it. And I very quickly got into washing up in the kitchen, and I don't mean pots and pans. And spent a lot of time doing that. I was still trying to lead a normal life at that time. I'd left college. I couldn't continue with college. I'd dropped out of everything and tried to work. But it's very difficult to hold down a job when you're in the middle of a 5-day crack bender. It just doesn't pan out. And so very quickly, anything that I tried to do that was my normal, what I perceived to be a normal life, I wasn't capable of, and I wasn't prepared. I don't think I could have stopped the journey that I was going on in my drug-fueled life, but I knew it was wrong. I knew, my family have always worked. My parents came from quite poor beginnings and have done, well for themselves and have always worked hard, and that's it. And that's the sort of upbringing that I had. But I was a drug addict. I wasn't able to lead a normal life. And that life, and everything that went with it just became absolute mayhem, madness. I came from a small town. I was a naive young girl with no life experience whatsoever, and all of a sudden I'm driving around with fucking kilos of puff and ounces of coke and bags of pills, and I'm doing all of this stuff, and I'm not thinking about the consequences. None of that came into my mind, and all of a sudden I'm driving it, I'm collecting it all. It started off me driving him around to do all of that stuff. And then it got to the point where, I was a 17-year-old fucking naive girl driving around collecting all of the, driving with all this money and collecting all of these drugs, and not even considering what that could have meant in my life. And just thinking it was great. I thought I was something. I thought I'd arrived. I thought I was this big person. But I wasn't. I was a silly kid. And very, very quickly things, progressed, and the relationship was violent and amazing and awful and fabulous. It was like it was just such this roller coaster. Everything was a roller coaster. There was no level stability, nothing at all. It was just immense highs and awful lows, and what started off as being surrounded by a lot ended up at bitter, awful, especially when I was into the heroin days, and he was always the control, so he's always the one that had it. He's the one that would decide when, where, and all of that sort of stuff. No, that's not working for me. So obviously I needed to steal from him. He brought it on himself, to be honest with you. If he hadn't have been so controlling, I wouldn't have had to have stolen so much from him. And, so it was obviously a healthy relationship we had, and loving and joyous and all of that stuff. And but I was in it. I was totally in it. There was no coming out of it. For all the violent episodes that there was, my family would try and get me. My brother came to try and get me out, and I might go home for a day or two, or then all the withdrawals would kick in, and so obviously I'm back, and and I'd think I was missing him, and it was just messy. It was messy. And my poor family, I was someone with promise. I was doing well at school. I was doing well at college. I was, I'd achieved a lot. And then here I am. Quickly, I was a shell of a person. And the only time I was happy was if I was on the bed. I mean, I don't know how I'm not basically disabled now, because my best position would be like this on the bed, and I would gouge out like this, head down on the bed, and probably covered in black down my face from the back of the foil where I've been burning it, foil stuck to my head or something, and I'd have to sort of like pull myself up because I would have been stuck in that position for like 7 hours. And that was perfect. That's it. That's what I was seeking, was just this absolute oblivion of nothingness. That's it. That was my only happy place. And to cut a long story short, one thing happened, and the next thing happened, and the next thing happens, and he ended up going to prison for 6 years. And at which point, that sort of control has gone then. So he was that control in my life, and that's gone. So then I'm left to myself, and there was then no control whatsoever. And any of the drugs that we had as the business, I took. I had them because I'm not selling them, because I want them. And then, things went very wrong very quickly. And following, I did multiple treatment centres. The first one being because I'd been arrested, I was facing prison, and my parents arranged for me to go into rehab. And so we went to the court case, and my parents said, this is what we've got set up, she can go in there tomorrow. And they said, right, you obviously want to you're obviously remorseful, blah, 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 blah. Your parents have paid for this for you, then you'll go to there. So I went into treatment as a prison swerve, really. And I was introduced to the 12 steps, and I had no clue what that meant. I had no clue about the disease of addiction. I had no clue about anything. I had no clue about the principles of entire abstinence. That seems like madness. I just need to stop taking heroin. That's it. That's all I need to do, and then life will be fine. And I went into rehab. I was 21. I didn't have any decent behaviours in me at all. I just jumped from one SR to the next. That's it. That's all I did was fix my feelings on men to get through rehab. That's it. And I wouldn't say I've learned much about myself, because I was still incapable of being honest. I haven't lied through this share, much as I had some guidance to do that, but I lied my way through rehab because I was of that mindset of, well, I haven't been abused, I haven't had this, that and the other go on in my life, I haven't had all of this ghastly stuff go on that some of you have, I just must be a bad person. So clearly I have to make some stuff up, because, there's got to be a reason why I'm a drug addict. There must be. And I didn't grasp the disease concept at all. Oh my God. Sorry, time's really flown by. So I didn't do the whole thing of getting a sponsor. I didn't find out what was wrong with me. None of that stuff. But the journey brought me to Bournemouth. And I was in the rooms thinking that just going to meetings would be enough, and it wasn't. Not having a sponsor I needed to get a sponsor. I might have had one by name, but I didn't utilise that sponsor. Nothing changed. It was more important for me to get a job. It was more important for me to have external things in my life, and I relapsed, and the relapse lasted for 5 years and got worse and worse, and I ended up I did a couple more rehabs, but really for the last sort of 6 months of my using, I was just injecting drugs all the time and fitting. That's it. That's all I ever did, was just have crack fits all the time, and so I did everything I could to get myself sorted, and I got into rehab and used in rehab, and I got kicked out of rehab, and that's the last time that I used, and that's just over 19 years ago now. And the difference being is, when I went into that rehab, I had got myself a sponsor ready for when I left rehab, so thankfully I had her in place. So when I got kicked out, I rang her, and she was like, right, get your ass round here now. And I did. And she basically took control of my life when I wasn't capable of doing it. I gave her my cash point cards. I gave her the spiritual license to just deal with me. And we went through the steps in just over 40 days, and I was sponsoring people before I was out of newcomers time, and that's been my journey ever since, is that I've never stopped helping the next person through the door. I've always sponsored women and a couple of men, actually, which was weird, and I've always done service. I've always been part of CA. Now, I believe in all of the fellowships. I really do. I think they're all amazing and they save lives. CA is the one that works for me, and this is where I come along. The message is shouted loud and clear at CA in ways that I understand. And what I got to know is I really understood for myself the disease concept of addiction. And I believe in it, and that's through having that belief and that understanding, it makes working the rest of the steps so much easier. My one issue is God, and it's always been an area for me which I've struggled with. Now, for anyone who has that belief absolutely cemented in their hearts and you're there with it, I envy you, because I have a very, very tricky mind that struggles with that. So my suggestion to anyone, if you do have an issue with the principles or the ideas of God, the ways in which I have managed that is that I just do the actions. And if I do those actions, well, here I am and I'm all right. If I sit in my brain up here, it's not a good place to be. So I just try to ignore that and just do the next best thing, which is I do the actions. And here I am, and you can't dispute the reality that I have had long-term sustainable recovery despite highs and lows of life. And there has been many highs, but there has been some lows, and not at any point have I wanted to take any kind of substances, and my recovery is held true and solid throughout that, and it's with the thanks to all of you, and I'm sorry because I've really gone over time, so thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Nicole.